All right, welcome everybody to droidCon Online. This is our second part in our multi-platform series. If you were here with us last time, we had a couple of great presentations on Kotlin multi-platform. We're excited to have a discussion tonight about Flutter. We've got some great speakers lined up as usual. I keep my introduction short so that we can jump right into the important stuff, which is the presentations and our speakers. And we're really glad that we have them with us tonight. Just as usual, a few housekeeping items. As you know, you can find the complete library of all of the droidCon online webinar videos at droidcon.com, as well as anything from the past droidcons. So you should be able to find there at droidcon.com. So if you miss anything tonight or have to click away early for any reason, you'll be able to find a video, also fully transcripted, indexed, and searchable on droidcon.com. So we look forward to seeing you there as well. As you know, if you've been with us before, we use Slido for the Q&A. What the Slido does is it allows us to have a central repository for the questions where you as the participants can vote on which questions are the most important. So be sure to go to slido.com, enter the code 21946. And if you see a question that's been asked that you thought you were going to ask, give it a thumbs up, vote on it so that all of the most important questions float to the top. We have, each speaker has about 10 minutes for Q&A, so we want to make sure that we get to all of the most relevant and important questions. So be sure to go there. Also, if for some reason throughout the course of the presentation you have missed this number or it doesn't work, Uli will be sending this over the chat window with a direct link for you to be able to get to Slido to the questions. Coming up next, just so you know, on the 30th of July, we've got a great presentation from Bugsnag on Bugs Don't Shelter in Place. This is going to be great. So be sure also to go to online.droidcon.com and make sure you check out that webinar as well. As I said, I keep my introduction short and sweet. So without further ado, I'm really happy to announce our speakers for tonight, Rémon and Salih. Painless Flutter embedding in your existing app and effective app architecture and state management. We're going to be talking first about how to embed a standalone Flutter module into an existing Android app. And then Salih is going to take us through some more of the intricacies in the architecture. So I think this is going to really build on each other, and we're excited to have them. So what I'd like to do at this point is invite Rémon to share his turn on his webcam so we can see him, and we're going to make him the moderator so that he can share his slides. So let me do that. You're going to see me disappear, and Rowan, you can share your screen now.
Okay.
There we go.
I think everybody can see my screen now.
Yes, we sure can.
Awesome. Okay, let's get started then.
It's all you. Good. Take it away.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to droidCon Online Multi-Platform Series. And my name is Rémon Helmond, and I'm going to talk about painless Flutter embedding in your existing app. A bit about myself. I'm from the Netherlands. I am a mobile app developer at Philips Hue, and I work with Flutter since 2018. Within Philips Hue, we launched two apps that are built natively or from scratch in Flutter. Those are the Philips Hue Bluetooth app and the Philips Hue Sync app. Furthermore, I am maintainer of the Flutter Reactive BLE library, which is a library that maintains multiple Bluetooth connections in Flutter. I'm a sports fanatic and I'm Stand 3 certified, which means I know my stuff about wines. I'm really looking forward to connect to you, so feel free to reach out on me on either Twitter or LinkedIn. Yeah, so let's get started. A bit about Flutter. Well, everybody did hear about it, but just for completeness, Flutter is Google's UI toolkit on which you can build multiple natively compiled applications from a single code base. If you just want to start with Flutter, I really urge you to check out their website. They have really great resources and also great tutorials. The website is below. a bit about the technical overview of Flutter, because that gives also a good overview of how the embedding actually works. So first of all, we have the framework layer, which consists of the widgets where you can define your animations, and everything in there is written in the Dart programming language. And actually, Dart is a language that is introduced by Google, and as Flutter as well. The next part is the engine, which is built in C and C++. And what it is doing for us is actually making sure that the frames that you created in Flutter are properly scheduled in the correct sequence, and also that the data is that is sent from Flutter towards the platform is actually arriving well. And that brings me also to the next part, because that's the embedder. As you can probably imagine, is that each platform has its own threading mechanism and also a different way of rendering things. So that's why that each platform has its own Flutter embedder for that. Also, check out the link that I provided below. That will give you also a bit more background information on it. Now let's get started where we all come from, the add-to-app approach. Actually, of course, what I already mentioned, the two apps that I started with on Flutter, they were greenfield projects, which is quite a luxury because we could start with Flutter from scratch. But of course, we all have legacy apps, and if we want to get started with Flutter, then without the add-to-app approach, we need to choose to really rewrite everything, and that's something we ideally wouldn't like to do. So because of that, they introduced this approach, and what it's actually doing is you can create a Flutter module and you can embed it into your existing code base, and it will run seamlessly in your existing APK. It works for both iOS and Android. I'm an Android developer, so the only thing what I can say about iOS is that I saw working examples of it. How it works roughly is that on iOS, you can link it together with Cocoa pods or embed the framework into Xcode. And since Flutter version 1.12, the add-to-app approach has become pretty solid. If someone tried it before that version, it was a bit more difficult, but since version 1.12, they have really nice plugin structure and also great embedding, which makes your life quite easy. There are two ways to add a Flutter module into your app. It is creating the module inside your existing code base and link it together. This is also the thing that I want to show you when I'm going into more detail. The other way is create a separate repository and then build it an AAR and then integrate it into your existing app. What it is doing is you need to run a Flutter build command, build AAR. It will build a kind of Maven repository. And what you need to do then is you need to make sure that the Maven repository is uploaded somewhere in, for example, an Artifactory or a location that makes sense to you where you can easily access it. And what you then do is integrate it into your Gradle build. If you run the command, they also provide really nice output how to do it. It's quite simple. I decided to create an example app, comfort food app. I am really big fan of pizzas and burgers, so I was really happy to make a nice app for that. And actually, I explained a bit about the structure. So what you see on the left is the launch screen where you can select two restaurants. And you can, in the middle, you see a pizza screen where you can decide, okay, which size it is, and it will change the price. And that pizza is a separate Android module in my app. And also, the third screen is an order overview. So once you select, the burger or the pizza you want, you press OK. And then you can decide to complete the order, and then you get a nice overview with the total price. Also on the right, you see my new module, which is the the Burger module, and this is 100% built in Flutter. Okay, first of all, what do we need? Well, of course, we need the Flutter SDK, and the Flutter SDK can be downloaded from the Flutter website. You probably guessed that. Of course, we need our beloved Android Studio, and we need to make sure that we install the Flutter plugin, which is available from the marketplace of Android Studio. And then what we also need is an existing Android project that actually builds. Then, because we installed the Flutter module, it will provide, we can say in Android Studio, new module and then Flutter module. And then it provides us a really nice wizard, which is quite convenient. We fill in some details. And what it then does, it will provide some kind of structure, what you actually can see here. I want to highlight some parts of the structure out. First of all, this is the .android folder, which is generated, and it contains a lot of bindings. And for example, it will make sure that it can find the Flutter SDK. It consists of references to some Gradle files, which make sure that you can build your app and that your Flutter module is properly bundled. The next thing is the lib and the test folder, which consists of your source code plus your unit tests and widget tests. And what is very important is the pubspec YAML file. And the pubspec YAML file contains, you declare there your dependencies. And also what you can do is define some metadata. And what is very important, for example, is the name and the version of it. After generating, what it does more is also it creates a reference to a Flutter project. And this is very important for the embedding because this specific project will do a lot of magic under the hood, especially when we are building the app. For example, what it is doing is it will make sure based on the ABI that you have, so the processors that you support, it will make sure that it grabs the correct Flutter engine. And what it also will do is it will grab the dependencies from embedding. So when you start using the Flutter engine or the Flutter activity, which I will talk about later, you don't need to add those dependencies to your Gradle file, but it's already there by this project. Another reference, what you see on the right, and this is actually the embedding itself, it will link the module and it will refer to the include flutter.groovy, and that one starts a chain of events actually. Because of this approach, it also means that there is a limitation that you can only embed one Flutter module per app. But of course, there's quite a lot of flexibility where you can add multiple screens, and I will talk about that a bit later. Next, what we need to do is, of course, we need to write the application code. I'm not going to talk a lot about Dart code, but you can see here, I created a screen containing of some text views. I created a nice checkbox, some image, and of course, some calculation that updates the price when we add price to our burger. And when we click on OK, what it actually is doing, it will close the app and it will return back to Android. Also, what is quite convenient is that you can run the Flutter app independently on the phone. And that helps in the beginning because you probably don't want to start with embedding until you know for sure it actually works. So what you need to do is you need to run the main.dart file. Okay, then, of course, we have some screen that we can integrate. And what we need to do next is actually integrate the Flutter activity. I chose to use a Flutter activity for the embedding, but there are also other ways to embed Flutter. For example, you can embed it through a fragment and through a Flutter view. What the Flutter activity is actually the easiest way to integrate and embed Flutter because it provides us, it does a lot of work for us, and also it handles a lot of lifecycle events. Also, what you can do, for example, in a Flutter activity is display a splash screen. You can also define a different Dart file to run. the entry point, or you can choose a different route. And routes are in Flutter ways of navigating through the app. So if you want to start a separate part of the app, you can use a route for that. And also, when you start the embedding, you can say, okay, I want to run Flutter and execute this specific route. What I already mentioned, if you're a big fan of the one activity approach, you can use the Flutter fragment, but you need to be aware that you need to forward a couple of calls. And for example, a couple of calls that you need to forward is on post resume and on back pressed, and a couple of more. So yeah, Flutter activity is much easier in that regard. And actually, then the only thing what we need to do is I have a card. What I say, okay, I have a Flutter activity, I create a default intent, and I will start it. And then I want to give a demo. So let's see how it looks. So I have my app, and I press on the burgers, and it starts, but I will do it again, because probably what you already noticed is when I tap Mike's Burgers, you see a black screen for around 2 seconds. And as you can see, before it actually loads. So now we go back. So it's awesome, but it is, for user experience, it's not really fast because yeah, it feels a bit slow, right? Let me explain a bit to you what happened. So when we created the default intent in the Flutter activity, what the activity does for us, it will create a new Flutter engine for us. It will create GNI bindings. It will also initialize our app that we created, and it will execute the default route that we have. And as you can imagine, that takes a couple of seconds before everything is wired up. And that's also what you saw. If only we could make it faster. Well, you probably guessed it, we definitely can, because the Flutter team introduced the concept of a warmed up Flutter engine. And I think it makes sense to speed it up and warm this engine up. First of all, what we need to do is we need to create an ID for it. And that ID is not for the engine itself, but it's for the cache, so it can be found. Because later we need to ask to the cache, okay, give us a specific Flutter engine. Then, of course, we create the Flutter engine. And I want to talk a bit about what the Flutter engine is. Because a Flutter engine, you can see it as a kind of a container through which you can run Flutter code and Dart code into your Android application. And what you also see in the second line is, the second line below the creating of the Flutter engine, you will actually do the warm up. Because if you just create the Flutter engine, it doesn't do anything yet. But if you say to the Dart executor of the Flutter engine, execute a certain Dart entry point, then it will actually start warming up. This also means that it will start consuming memory, and you need to pay the resources that it will cost to wire it up. Last but not least, what we need to do, of course, is we need to put it in the engine cache, and that's quite simple. It's a singleton that we can retrieve, and we just say to the instance, okay, we add it here with the corresponding ID. So this is what we had before. And this is what we have now. So what we are doing is we say to the Flutter activity, instead of creating a default intent, we now say use a cached engine from the cache. And then, of course, we build an intent and we start it. So let's see how that looks. I press now Mike Burgers. And as you can see, it is really fast at this moment. I will do it again. to be sure. And as you can see, it is instantly. So this is pretty awesome, because now we have the user experience that we want. The screen is wired up nicely. The only thing what we now need to do is, of course, make sure that the data is there. Some attention points by using the warmed up engine, because of course it comes with a price that we need to be aware of. When you pre-warm the Dart code, it means that it begins executing immediately. So it also means that it starts with memory, consuming memory, and also executing some the code that you defined in your entry point. Also, what you need to make sure of is that when you want to free up the resources, you call flutter engine.destroy, because it outlives your flutter activity or flutter fragment. Of course, what I said is there are performance implications, and I saw on the Flutter website they have put some numbers. It was based on version 1.10. We are now at 1.17, so they are a bit outdated, but it gives you at least some indication. You need to think of that wiring up a Flutter engine costs 42 MB memory, and also when you start warming up, there is a blocking call to the UI thread of 330 milliseconds. So that's important to notice. Also, what you need to do is you need to make sure that when you start warming up, you choose already the correct Dart entry point and also the correct Flutter route. You cannot change it afterwards. And last but not least, if the Flutter activity is the first activity that you want to show on startup, warming up doesn't really make sense, because you need to wait for everything to start at the beginning. The last thing that we need to do is, of course, sending the data. And what we need to use for that is method channels. And what are those? So you can see it as indeed a name channel that sends data between the Flutter client and the native host. That's the approach I used for this embedding, but you can also do it the other way around. So Flutter can also be the host, and native can be the client. Messages and responses are always passed asynchronously. You can make sure that from the host that you provide the correct callback, so the client can handle on either the error or the success that you have. And this is very important for Android users, because when you start using Flutter, you want actually to execute some background processing. For example, Bluetooth or databases, you need to execute that natively. And of course, if you do that, the work there is handled on a background thread. But if you want to give a callback towards Flutter again, you need to make sure that you invoke that callback on the main thread of Android. The same counts when you are using streams and you want to send data. You need to make sure that it's provided also on the main thread there. A bit of architecture overview that will give you some explanation about my implementation. First, of course, I want to invoke a method complete order from the Flutter client, and I provide some arguments. At some point, Android starts processing it, checking some things, and it will provide me a success. How does it look on the Flutter side? What we need to do? First, we need to create the method channel. And the name that we create is important, because this one needs to match also on the Android side. Then, of course, what I did is I created a kind of simple backend. I invoke a method called complete order. Also, the string name of the method needs to match on the Android side. And I provided some arguments. And as you can see, the arguments are a list of dynamic. And that is because I'm using the standard codec for Flutter. And what that one is doing, before it will actually send it towards native, it will convert it to binary for me. So yeah, that's why I can do this. Also, there's another standard codec that is provided, and that is a JSON codec. But there are also other codecs available as third party. And for example, for my Bluetooth library, I'm using protobuf protocol, which provides us a bit more type safety. Okay, so we have everything on the Dart side, and now we need to go back to the Android side. And what we need to do first is create the method channel as well with the same name. And now it's actually quite convenient that I added the Flutter engine in my application because I can easily access it through application context. And what we need to provide, if we create a method channel, we need to provide the nice binary messenger of the Flutter engine. And of course, the matching name that is the same on Flutter. Then what we need to do is we need to set a method call handler because we are the host and we need to handle the requests that we get from the Flutter client. So let's look how that sees. We created an order method call handler and we override from the embedding the method call handler. That means also we are forced to override on method call. And what you can see here is I first check the method name. If it is invoked with the correct complete order string, then I will do some things. But if not, I will say, okay, this method is not implemented. And so we can handle on the Flutter side the issue. Furthermore, of course, what you see here is also the arguments are a list of any. And we need to make sure that the types are correctly. And if they are correctly, we can do the processing. And we report the success to Flutter. And if not, we report some error that the incorrect values are supplied. Let's see now the result. How does it look like? I tap on Mike's Burgers. Well, let's add some fries as well. I press OK. You see a button below appearing, which is a good sign already. And if I press it, what you can see here is I get the ultimate burger with fries for $10. So this is really awesome. We completed everything what we wanted to do now. But I can imagine I went through it in 20 minutes. So I think it's very good to wrap things up what we did. So first of all, we created the Flutter module using the Flutter plugin that we installed on Android Studio and because of that, it wired up nicely and it generates a lot of things so we can actually embed the module. Then, of course, we created the code and what happens is we could launch the Flutter module when we clicked on the card for Mike's Burgers. Then what we did is because we weren't happy of the user experience, we used a warmed up Flutter engine. And last but not least, we were able to send the data so we can provide a nice overview of the order. Some attention points in regards to the add-to-app approach, because there are some things you need to be aware of. First of all, Flutter does not support 32 bits and MIPS processors. So if you want to start with embedding Flutter, you need to make sure that you deprecate those processor architectures. And also, even more important, you need to set the correct ABI filters in your Gradle file. Because if you don't do it, and you still have so people that have a 32 bits phone, for example, can still install your app. And then it will crash because the Flutter engine for that processor architecture cannot be found. So that's quite nasty. Also, what I read on the documentation is that Flutter in background mode is not fully supported. Already I saw they are doing quite some work on it, but it's still work in progress, so use it at your own risk. Yeah, what I already mentioned before is you cannot embed multiple Flutter modules into one application. Of course, what you can do is you can use different Dart entry points. And also what you can do is you can play around nicely with routes. If you define your navigation correctly in Flutter, you can say from the embedding, okay, in this case, I want to execute this specific part of my app, and a bit later, I want to execute that specific part of my app. Also in Flutter, it can happen that you are using some Android plugins and that those Android plugins are not using the latest plugin structure. What you will see is when you compile your app, it will give you a warning that, hey, keep in mind the Flutter plugin X that you're using is using old Android plugin structure. So really, yeah, make sure that you migrate it, because else we cannot guarantee it behaves nicely. Also, and this is quite a no-brainer, you need specific CI for Flutter because the ecosystem is totally different, a different language. Also, what is very important is that from version 1.17, and this is the latest stable, that you need to make sure that your application is migrated to Android X. This is a very interesting one because both Flutter and Android, they are using the Material Design library, which is Google's UI library. And what can happen is that if there are some new components in the Material library, it can happen that they are present on Android, but not in Flutter, or the other way around. So if you want to use those components, always make sure that they are available in both, because you ideally would like to have the same UX experience on both sides. Also, what they say, we saw a really nice trick like warm up the Flutter engine, but of course you cannot do that unlimitedly. Actually, what they are saying, the Flutter team is saying, yeah, if you want to use multiple Flutter engines, you can do it. We won't limit it, but it is at your own risk. And the last point that I want to address is that you need to make sure, for example, if you use Crashlytics in your Flutter module and you use also Crashlytics in your Android, what can happen is that, for example, in Android, you use a newer version of Crashlytics than is available in the Flutter plugin. Of course, what Gradle is doing normally, it resolves the versions and it will install the newest one. But of course, if there are in the API some breaking changes, your Flutter implementation will not work. So in that case, you need to make sure that both Crashlytics on Flutter as in Android are of the same version. Some useful resources that I want to share with you. The basic example that I showed you is available on GitHub. So feel free to look into it. I'm also planning to add some more complicated scenarios for that to give a bit more overview. Also, really check out the Flutter website. They have really good documentation about add to app, also for iOS. And if you are an Android developer and you want to get started, they have a nice starting point. That is the third bullet point. And last but not least, platform channels. I just scratched the surface on it with the meta channel, but they are really powerful. So check them out. And then I want to thank you for your attention. I really enjoyed speaking with you about Android embedding, and I'm looking forward to answer any questions that you have. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Rémon. It was really fantastic. Appreciate all the tips and the resources as well. We do have a few questions, so we'll make Uli the moderator, and he'll be able to show you what questions have come up on Slido. So it's all you.
Perfect.
So you should see the screen right now, and you can feel free to read the top question and
Okay. Can I use Flutter to share business logic, code, view models, service calls between platforms? Yeah, of course you can. I mean, what you can do, for example, is if you have some business logic that resides on Android and you want to use it, you can create a meta channel, what I showed you already, and you can execute that function that is on the Android side, and you can make sure that the data is provided into your Flutter application. What is also really nice is actually the platform channels, and I use that a lot for my Bluetooth library because most of the time we have reactive applications, and what you can do there is actually you can provide the platform channel, and that opens a stream between native and Flutter, and then you can react on events from the Flutter side, for example. So this is actually really nice. I hope I answered the question. Next one. Are there any benefits of adding Flutter modules to your app if you only have an Android app and don't need the multi-platform? Oh, that's a really good question. So actually, what I really like about Flutter is if you really have an application that needs to have consistent design on both iOS and Android. And we all know if you were in that situation, that it's quite complicated because natively both platforms implement some things a bit differently. So if that is a big requirement from the business, then indeed it makes really sense to start using Flutter. But indeed, if you don't have a need for multi-platform, then the only reason that I can say, okay, it's fun to work with Flutter and learn something new. Are there any negative impacts on performance when using Flutter instead of developing natively? Well, of course, if you run the Flutter engine, what I already talked about is it will consume some memory, right? So you need to make sure that the 30 or 42 MBs are available. But in UI experience, Flutter is really fast. Actually, they are doing a really good job. I saw some benchmarks, and what I saw between React, Flutter, and native. And native was just a bit faster, but also I saw already some cases that Flutter is even faster. So they were quite comparable. React Native is still a bit slower in that regard. Okay. Would you use Flutter or Kotlin native if you only want to share business logic? Yeah, that's a really good question as well. It really depends on what you really like. Because if you have a lot of experience with Kotlin native, then it indeed makes really sense to go for that one. But of course, if you also think maybe we have a need to build some screens and we want to move more to a more consistent design on both platforms, then go for Flutter. Okay. If you use a Flutter activity and you navigate within Flutter code to some screens, will things like Android backpress work like expected? Yes, I can actually show that. So what it will do is actually it starts an activity. So if you do a backpress, it will also close the activity. But of course, what you need to keep in mind is if you have a pre-warmed engine, it don't destroy the engine. So in that case, you need to make sure that when you come back to that specific activity, that you also destroy the engine. Of course, if you don't need it anymore. Okay. What is the benefit of using multiple Flutter engines if you can only use one Flutter plugin in your app? Or do you use one engine per entry point? So if you use a warmed up engine, you already need to make sure that you define the correct entry points up forehand. So if you have two different Dart entry points, then of course you need to use multiple warmed up Flutter engines. But you can also decide to not use a warmed up Flutter engine. What you can do is, for example, if you have a previous activity and you know, okay, next activity, I may need a Flutter embedding, you can already make sure in that previous activity you start a Flutter engine and you warm it up. And then in the next activity, when the user presses it, it will have already a nice warmed up engine. And then when you are a bit further in the app, you can say, okay, at some point I destroy it, and you can also create in a different activity a new engine. How would you test the integration? That's a good one, because what I normally would do is make sure that both modules are tested separately already, and then I would go for example for a very lightweight test, maybe 2 or 3 scenarios, just to check that it is working, and then I would maybe consider tools like Appium for it. Okay. With each Flutter bound to a single Flutter route. Is it possible to test the Flutter UI using Appium? Yes, because it builds just an APK, and you can test it for sure. And then with each Flutter engine bound to a single Flutter route, what's the best practice to implement lots of unconnected screens in Flutter within a native app? So what you can do in that case is what I told you before. You have at some point you have some activity and you need a specific Flutter round a bit later. So what I would do then is make sure that you warm up an engine with that specific route, and also close it to free up the resources, and then make sure that in some other parts in your app that you warm up an engine with a different route and then start using that one. What are your thoughts about mixing native and Flutter in a large code base with lots of engineers/moving parts? My thoughts is actually if you make if you just discuss it with each other and you have good ground rules about how to do it, and you have a nice modularized app, in my opinion, that's really a thing that you need to do. Then I think it can really work. So if you have, most in large code bases, mostly teams are responsible for a couple of modules, and if you have a good separation in that regard, I don't see any issue to do that. And then last one, that's or Flutter or Jetpack Compose. For me, that's 100% Flutter. And to turn the situation around, have you seen a Flutter app use Kotlin multi-platform for business logic? Ooh, that's really interesting. I didn't see it, but probably there is one because the app community is quite creative. So if you see one, send it to me. I'm quite curious. Okay, thank you.
Well, thanks so much for being with us. It was really great having you. Stick around also too, and also everybody else, because we've got a great presentation building on this. Salih is going to be, we'll ask you to turn on your webcam now so we can see you're going to be talking about Flutter's state management options. And so I think this is going to be a great continuation of the discussion on the intro that we just had from Rémon. So Salih, thanks for being here with us. Everyone, Salih took a huge risk being here. He's right in the middle of preparing for a wedding, so we hope his fiance is okay with him taking time with us, because I know he's been busy. So we're going to let you get rock and roll, but congratulations again on that.
Thank you very much.
So I'm going to make you the moderator now, so you should be able to share your screen with us so we can see your slides. I'm going to pop off, and the time is yours, Salih.
Okay, let's first share my screen. Okay, cool. Great, so we can see my screen right now, so that's good news. So first of all, hello everyone. It's really nice and amazing to be here and talk to you about Flutter because like for me, droidCons, like all of them are like really special conferences, and it's always nice for me to be part of it. Plus, having an opportunity to talk about state management, because if you have like only looked at Flutter only once, most likely you have already seen a lot of state management approaches. And today we will go through for me, the most important ones and have better understanding about them. And lastly, we will see some code so we can understand them even better. So before we go through, let's get to know me a bit more. So I'm Salih. I've been developing Flutter since like 30 years now. I've been in the Flutter world from the early stages. I'm a Flutter and Dart GD. I'm a Google developer expert for both. And like I like talking about at the conferences and at the meetups and everything, and share my experience with the others so they can have a better start on Flutter than anybody else, let's say. And since I love communities, I already created 2 communities, one in Turkey because I'm originally from Turkey. What we do with the Turkish communities, we take the English documentation, translate them into Turkish because, you know, like speaking speaking English is a luxury in some countries and not everybody has a chance to speak the other languages. So we want to be able to make the information accessible for almost everybody possible. So that's the good part. And if you ask me, okay, Salih, you talk about this stuff and etc., but are you using Flutter at work? And I do. I'm working for a bank called Clar, and it's a fintech company which is active in Mexico right now. And we are building our app fully on Flutter, and we are really happy about it. So let's talk about the agenda today. First of all, we will talk about software architecture. So this will be our, let's say, warm-up part, so we can actually get to know each other better and understand what are we talking about when we say software architecture, because this is a concept that can confuse a lot of people. So we will make this even more clearer for the other people. Secondly, we will talk about state and state management and what are the state management options in Flutter. In detail, we will have a grading card for each state management approach, and I will share my personal experiences with them so you can have a better understanding about it. Lastly, we will pick one of the state management approaches and create an actual simple app and see the code and the simple architecture about it. And lastly, we will have Q&A part. So you will ask me any question that you want to ask, and I will try to answer everything that I know. If I don't know, then I will be crying out here. Okay, if you're ready, let's get started with software architecture. I mean, like, if you're a software developer, you know that software architecture is one of the taboo words that everybody talks about, but not everybody has a clear understanding about it, right? For us, the software architecture is a shared understanding between the developers so they can see what's going on within their application, right? It is mainly a blueprint of what's going on in your project. So do not overcomplicate this. Do not think it out loud. Sorry, think it harder. This is what it is. It is exactly this. Think about a blueprint, think about a room blueprint, and think about it in the case that you have a software product. This is what it is. We are warming up, we are gonna get deeper and deeper about it. So what is architecture pattern? When I talk about architecture pattern, what I mean here, architecture pattern is basically the reusable solutions that you can think of to create the architecture of your application, right? So you will be following some principles to be able to actually achieve a software architecture. If you go to the internet, you will see a lot of architecture patterns. And the good thing about these patterns is you do not have to pick one. Like you can achieve the software architecture patterns in any platform that you want. Obviously, there are some that are more famous within the mobile development world, like layered architecture. I think this is the most common one. I'm sure you heard about data layer, domain layer, UI layer, and so on and so forth. Like this is it. We have event-driven architecture pattern, which is like, I think it was quite famous around 2008 in the Android world. We have approach. I'm sure you have heard about RX, and a lot of RX fans, I'm sure, out there. And monolithic applications, which is basically mostly what Google is doing with their repositories. Just put a lot of different concerns in one repo and like control everything in one place. Cool. But how do we pick one, right? How do we decide on? First of all, you need to consider your experience. If you have experience with something, try to stick with that, because like there is no point of reinventing the wheel. If something is working and if you know it, just use it. It's that easy. Or if you don't know it, then think about, make an analysis of what you want to build and think about a system that you can achieve it. Besides that, have some set of reusable elements. Think about the risks, think about the costs, and think about how you can actually achieve what the stakeholder wants from you by repeating these actions. And if you see something that is working for you, then good. This is what you need for it. Now that we have a basic understanding about software architecture, now we will learn about state management, because this is the real deal. This is the topic that most of you are here for. So what is state, right? What do we mean by state? So state is basically a set of information about a part of your UI that can change along the way. So state is quite simple. It's an information. But why do we need something to manage it? Because state can be mutable, because state can be around whole app or local, even it doesn't matter where it is. If you want to use it, you also want to be able to mutate it. And for that, you will have state management. But what kind of states do we have? But mainly, you need to think about two state approaches. One of them is app state, which is the state that is available or correct for the whole app. The other one is called ephemeral state. You can call it as a local state. And this local state will be the state that you will be using in the parts of your UI. So as I said, as you go deeper and deeper, you need to be able to share this state with the other widgets, or like the children, or you want to be able to mutate it. And now we have the state management term that we have in our minds. And since Flutter is new, every day we are hearing some new approach from, since Flutter is getting better and more famous, we're hearing a lot of information or a lot of new state management approaches around us. So how do we pick one, right? How are we going to pick one? Now we will learn about all the important state management approaches, from the basic to the most complicated ones. Let's go. I want to make a poster out of this word. Like if you're coming from React, or if you know React Native a bit, I'm sure you heard about Dan Abramov. And the rule of thumb is to do whatever is less awkward. Use the one that you know the best. That's it. Like this is how you can actually pick a state management approach. Now we will get to know it, and you will try to understand what you know the best. First, so in Flutter, the building blocks are mainly categorized into two different approaches. One of them is stateless widget, the other one is stateful widget. Stateful widget is the widget that can mutate the data that it has, and stateless widget is you can't change it. All the data there is immutable. Normally, both stateful widget and stateless widgets are immutable, but stateful widget has a special class inside called state, and this state is taking care of the mutability of the widget itself. It's super easy to use. Once there's a change, you just call a set state method, but it can be dangerous because once your widget tree goes deeper and deeper, the recreation process might cause some performance issues. So let's see the grade card for this. Stateful widget. So first of all, let's get to know our grade card. Easy to learn. Like for me, easy to learn and easy to implement are different things. So easy to learn means you can learn it easily, but easy to implement means it might take some time to implement it because there are a lot of boilerplate code that you need to write. Let's keep this in mind when we are talking about this. So stateful widget, it is easy to learn. I just taught you that. Like you are going to just use one method to be able to change the state. Quite simple, right? But is it scalable? What do we mean by this? For example, if you want to share this state between the widgets and mutate it in somewhere else, is it working like that? Is it working effectively like this? The answer is no, because set state is working locally. So it will change and mutate only the data within the local widget itself. So if you have a state that is effective only in the one place, one widget, you can use this one, that's good. But if you want to have a bigger state that is available through some child widget, then you need to skip this one. And I have another grade here called platform independent. Platform independent means, you know, like Dart is also a web language. So there is a Dart, Angular Dart part, which you can use actually like to share the logic between Angular Dart, which is like real native web part, and the Flutter itself. This is what Google did, and they have used this approach with AdWords app. And this is something that you can do, and this is what we're going to also check out with the state management approaches. So for this one, we are not platform independent because we need to have the Flutter widgets, so we can't just use it around Angular Dart. Is it easy to implement? Yes. As we saw, it's just set state, that's all. Is it testable? I will talk about the testability once and only here because I want to promote something about Flutter. Flutter is like quite amazing with the test because it gives us 3 different approaches to test our code. One is unit test, one is widget test, the other one is instrumented test. So widget tests are something new. Like if you're coming from Android, you would know about like unit test and instrumented tests. Like if you want to have the real device behavior, if you want to click, etc., then you can use instrumented tests with Espresso or whatever it is. You have that in Flutter as well. But widget test is something device independent and helps you to actually just pump a widget, check out if it is somehow virtually creating everything that you expect, and check out if it's behaving correctly. So everything that we are going to see here will have this testability check mark there because testing things with Flutter is quite easy. So we saw this grade mark and we know that it is not scalable. So a logical person would think, okay, Flutter team should do something about it and they need to come up with something, right? And actually they have. It is called inherited widget. So inherited widget is a special widget that is helping us to share information through the widget tree. So if we have an information in a parent and if you want to know about it in the child widget, you can get it with inherited widget. Inherited, all the widgets has an address called context, and by using this address, we can go through the widget tree, get the most available information, and bring back that. And inherited widget is doing this directly. So let's check out how we can implement the inherited widget. Let's think about this. Let me use my pointer here. Let's think about a frog caller, which is an inherited widget. It would ask for a view to be shown, and it will ask for information to be shared. So if you have the inherited widget, you can share the information that you have here by simply using a method from the context called context.depend on inherited widget of exact type. This is too long. We all know it. So that's why Flutter team came with a convention. So if you have done any Flutter development before, you would see that theme.off or media query.off, which means that you can use the context to get the information, and behind the scenes, it is actually doing this and trying to bring back the most recent information that is available here. And this is how it works. But as you see, for each information that is available, you need to call this inherited widget. So let's check the grade mark. Is it easy to learn? There is no other interesting information about this. So this is how it is. You have seen this. It is not super complicated. And for me, it wasn't complicated to learn as well. Is it scalable? Now we have passed the part to how we can share this state. And when there's a state change actually on this one, it will recreate the widget tree for us. So that is scalable. Is it platform independent? No, because we are still dependent on the Flutter's element tree structure. Is it easy to implement? As you see, it requires a lot of attention. Like you need to write this, blah, 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 and make it available. And if you want to do it for each information that you have, that is too much thing to do. So lastly, testability. We'll know that testability is not a problem. So still, we are not in the place that we are looking for, because inherited widget is taking a lot of energy from us. So what should we do? Now we have, and they had the same idea that we thought, and they came up with something called scope model first. Scope model was a set of code that was actually taken from the Fuchsia code base by Brian Egan. And it was for some time the state management approach that was actually recommended, but still it had extra effort to be done. So along the way, Rémon, a developer that is living in London right now, came up with something called Provider. Provider is actually like quite straightforward. It works like with the inherited widget logic. It is using the exact same code behind the scenes, so you don't have to deal with all the extra boilerplate. It is also helping us to share any kind of information, so not just one type. You can share all the information that you want from all the models that you can get. If you want to have an instant code, you can just call provider.auth and give the context, you get the data, that's all. And if you want to have a listener around it, and each time that it changes, if you want to do something with the widget, you can use consumer and selector widgets with it. It will bring back the information that you need by simply using this actually in the background. And if you want to control how many times you are recreating your widget, you can use the selector. Just give some values. It will check if it satisfies those values, it will recreate. Otherwise, it will not recreate the widgets. So provider is quite straightforward, going around three main objectives. So let's think about it. Provider was easy to learn because there are like basically three concepts, and mostly you are using two of them. So even you don't need the third one. They are scalable. They are super easy to implement. So you can just like provide the data from the point that you need downwards, and you can just use it. But one thing is still missing, right? It is not platform independent, because if you want to use this in Angular, this will not work because this is highly depending on the elementary structure. So this is not still the approach that you would go if you want to have an Angular Dart and Flutter application. So I don't know if we have any web developers around us, but at the same time, the same Brian Egan took the code from the Fuchsia code about scope model. He was thinking about, okay, we can use the Redux approach because Redux is unidirectional data flow, and we can have that in Flutter as well, because like Dart is already a reactive language, so we can have this unidirectional flow in Flutter in the Dart as well, which is a really good idea. Just think about the core concepts of Redux. You would have store, which is like holding information about the state. Then after, if you want to change something, you will have an event represented by an action. Action would go to a reducer, and reducer would change the store and the state. So just imagine some kind of a triangle for this, and you would think, okay, I can somehow do this because I already have a reactive language in my hands. let me use this. So this way we can use this one Redux approach as well. So what we are doing here is we are going to be implementing the exact what they did here is they have implemented the exact same logic here for Flutter as well. So now we are able to have something working nice for Angular, Dart, and Flutter as well, which is great. Now we can have something easy to implement. Redux is basically repeating some set of actions in our side. Is it scalable? It is perfectly scalable throughout your application. That's good. But for me, Redux was a concept that I could hardly understand, because right now I understood, but when I started Flutter, I was coming from Android. And for me, jumping into Redux was, I don't know, maybe it's me, but it was too much thing to handle. So it wasn't easy for me to learn. So I assume it would not be easy for another junior Flutter developer as well, if they are not coming from web. So let's continue. Now, recently, again, if you're coming from web, I'm sure you heard about MobX. MobX is, again, a state management approach that is using highly the reactive principles. We have observables, actions, and reactions in the heart of it. Basically, observables are the values, are the states that we are doing, that we are changing or listening. Actions are the actions that we are doing to change the state, and reactions are basically the side effects that we actually use to be able to change the information. MobX was there for JavaScript for a long time, but another Dart and Flutter GD, Palampodilla, had implemented MobX for Flutter, which was great because now we can actually take advantage of this reactive approach of Dart with the reactive platform like MobX. So let's check out the grade card for MobX. Before we check that, sorry, let's no, we talked about this. So let's check out the grade card. First of all, it is easy to learn. We will see the spoiler alert. We will see the example about this one. So it is easy to learn because like you learn 3 concepts and play around with it and have actually a working environment around those. Is it scalable? Yeah, you can use it in big applications. I've seen like 3-4 different applications, big scale applications using it recently. So it is working great. It is platform independent. That is amazing. So you can use it for Angular, Dart, and Flutter itself, and that's perfect. It is easy to implement because we will also see that we have a lot of code generation tools coming with MobX. So you will just take advantage of the annotations and use it directly. So I want to talk about lastly about block library. But before block, I want to give you a bit of a history about what block means. So block means business logic components. This principle had been implemented by the Google's AdWords team. As I said, they were using Angular Dart on the website, and they were using Flutter for their application. So they wanted to be able to share some logic between the Angular Dart app, like Angular app, and the mobile app. So they had said, okay, let's use the reactive way of Dart and create something like MVVM and basically communicate between the layers via streams. So since Dart uses streams, Dart has streams out of the box, it wasn't a problem for them, and they had implemented it. But one thing about it is not super easy to understand. Like back in the days when we started, everybody was trying to implement block, and it wasn't really easy to understand. But when you think about it, the logic is simple. So because of that, Felix Angelov, a developer from USA, had came up with a library called block. It works with exactly this logic. It takes care about the recreation of the widget, getting to know the states and everything for you. Right now, my favorite state management approach is this one. So you have the UI, you have some set of events that you create, and those events are triggered here in your block, and block generates a stream, and those stream is pushing back some states to the UI, and your UI gets updated. It is working with this logic, and it is working amazingly, I might say. So since I said all the good news, good words about it, you could see that this scorecard also has all the positive points. It is easy to learn. It has a lot of nice documentation in different languages. I think there are like 9 different languages for this. It is scalable, and good thing about it, it is platform independent. You have the core block library, but you use it with Angular or Flutter itself, whatever you need. It is easy to implement. Like once you get it, and you would get it quite easily, and it is easy to implement. Lastly, it is super highly testable. It has even a testing library for you to help you to mutate and mock your blocks itself. So that this is a great library as well. But why did I pick MobX, for example? I picked it because like you can see a lot of good examples about block out there, but I wanted to give you a bit more of an information about MobX, so you would learn something new today. So now we have learned about state management. Let's combine these informations. First, let's decide on the architecture pattern. Why did I decide to use layered pattern? Because as I said, there's no point of reinventing the wheel, and I think I'm aware of what's going on with the layered pattern, so I can implement what I want directly. I could also separate the I can also implement the separation of concepts here directly, so I could separate the UI from domain and data directly, whatever you want to call it. You can call this logic as well. And what they're going to do is you will have widgets here that is going to represent the UI for you. You would have the domain layer, which will be the MobX stores here, and MobX stores will be taking care of the state mutation. And in general, right now we don't have a repository, but if we did, you could have streams or MobX stores again to communicate from repository level to the block to the MobX stores itself. So you can communicate here, you can observe the data from UI to here and from here to here. So as I said, UI layer will be widgets. It will only have the UI related information. It will not do anything operational. It will just trigger those operations with the user interaction. So we will use the most complicated example. We will use the counter example from the Flutter's. When you create the Flutter project, you would have this example. I am not going to even change or do fine tuning. You will just understand what we are doing here. You have a state from widget here, but it could have been stateless widget as well, because we are not going to do any set state or anything. So first of all, we are seeing a counter here. Counter will be our MobX store. We will see it soon. What are we going to see here is we are going to see the title bar of our application, because like scaffold is a scaffold widget that's helping us to actually provide some material design widgets to put it to the right place. And really important point is this. Counter thing, the MobX store, the increment, that's all. Nothing more, nothing less. So it is not going to do the state mutation there. Let's see the body here. In the body, we will have an observer widget, which will be observing the state from the MobX store by the value here. And every time that it changes, it will change the information here as well. You can see it directly that it is just showing the data, not mutating, not doing anything. So let's continue. As I said, we will use MobX stores. It will do the business logic part. It will not do anything extra from our side. So here we have the counter class. Counter class will have a defined action called increment. So each time that we call increment, it will be saying that, okay, now change the value here and so on and so forth. But you are seeing a lot of boilerplate code, but I told you that we have actually code generation tool, and we do. So once you use the MobX code gen, you will just write annotation to notate that what is observable and what is action. And afterwards, the rest will be generated by the MobX code generation as well. We don't have the repository level right now, but if we did, we would use the same logic in the repository level as well. Let's wrap things up because I'm talking a lot. So picking up an architecture pattern or deciding on an architecture is highly, or it's the same for state management as well. It depends highly on your experience and your background. So if you are coming from web, you could pick something else, but if you're coming from mobile, you could pick something else as well. So pick the one that you know the best, suits you the best. Hype doesn't mean the best, because remember, block was the best thing in Flutter in the beginning and everybody was having a hard time. So use the one that you know better. Think carefully. Development is the easiest part. Making these decisions are the hardest one. So ask your peers and friends and get some input and feedback and just implement the one that you need. So to sum up, today we learned about software architecture, state management approaches. So I've seen some code. Now it is time for some Q&A. I have left some resources here. I will share the slides with the others if you need it, or you can also follow me on Twitter and I will share there as well. Yeah, thank you very much for listening to me. It was really nice to be part of it. And I think we are ready for questions, if we have any.
Salih, thanks so much for being with us today. It's been absolutely fascinating. Really appreciate all the examples you showed, why, testability, all the different, the matrix, how you evaluate all those. I think it was very much appreciated, certainly by me and by the community as well. I'm looking at our Slido feed and we haven't had any questions pop up. I think that probably speaks to a lot about in what detail you presented in, and it was a fantastic overview. So. I'm not seeing anything come in. I was going to give it a few minutes here, but I think we're actually probably good to go at this point. So
okay,
you did a great job. But I think Uli will be sharing over the chat. He shared your Twitter link so that people can reach out to you directly and ping you if they do have any questions afterwards. And certainly that information is on the presentation when people look at the video. So expect that we'll have some people reach out to you directly for any Q&A and follow up.
I'm more than happy to have anyone interested. So it's completely fine.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thanks so much again to you and to Rémon. Really appreciate you both being here. It was a fantastic presentation, and we look forward to more presentations in the future as part of our multi-platform series on Flutter and bringing in some more great presenters from the community. So thanks to you and to everyone else for being with us today. We look forward to seeing you again on our next webinar. Well, we did have one question that came up that said, good job. So that was, so got some good feedback there. In any case, all right, Salih, thanks so much. And again, congratulations and have a lot of good times on your preparations for the big day. So
yeah, thank you.
All right, take care, everyone. Have a good day. All right, bye-bye.